So we're going to do something today that is going to be very, very special. If you saw the documentary A Prayer for Compassion, then you saw this woman featured. She is Linda G. Fisher, and she really is a Renaissance woman. She is a fine artist, and I highly recommend that you visit her website, lindagfisher.com, to see some of her art. I believe it's also available on Fine Art America, just to get a sense of the animals and the spirit of animals and the spirituality of animals. It comes through her art in such an incredible way. And she is also an animal behaviorist and an animal empath, or what some people call an animal communicator, which I know is fascinating to a lot of people. And we'll be talking about that and other things. And also the fact that, as Reverend Sarah said, Linda G. Fisher is part of the Ojibwe Nation. Welcome, Linda.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. It's nice to be here.
Well, it's wonderful to have you here. You do so many things, and we have so few minutes, so I'm going to jump right in. Let's start just a little bit, Linda, with where all of this started for you. Were you raised to care about animals more than most people, or did you just come into this earth with that?
I think a little bit of both. I know my father, he was the one who encouraged the relationship with animals. The difficulty was that, like a lot of people, they have an idea, they get animals, and then things happen in life, and then the animals are surrendered or rehomed. And so it was difficult at that time because I was saying goodbye a lot to animals that I really got attached to. But I think that his love for animals, his kind of love, it connected me to the animal spirit in a sort of backward way. So we did have animals, which I really deeply enjoyed and appreciated.
Well, I think that what you're saying about being connected to the spirit of the animal is so much the essence of you. A lot of people work with animals, they're very kind to animals, they have an understanding of animals. Yours seems to go a little bit beyond that. So why don't we just go there first and talk about the spirit of animals and how you are able to connect with them as an empath?
I've written about this in one of the books I co-authored. Was my first experience with really understanding that connection and that spirit with animals was when my father took us fishing when we were children. I think I was probably only like maybe 7 years old, or 6 or 7. And it was one of those lakes where they put fish in the lake so people can pay to go fishing. And so that was my first experience. And all the kids were happy, and there were other families there with their children. And I was super excited too, because I thought this was going to be a fun outing with my family. And right off the bat, I caught a fish. And the feeling of the fish tugging on the line, I just had this instant, powerful connection and terror. I could feel everything that fish was feeling. And I screamed. It was a horrible feeling. And I can still remember that so clearly. And I screamed and cried, and I dropped the fishing pole. And the fish, so my father ran over really fast, and he picked up the pole, and he said, "You got to, showing me how to reel it in." I just couldn't do it. So it was a very traumatic experience, even though he was trying so hard to make it a positive one. So I think that was my first experience in understanding that animals, including fish, feel fear. And so from then on, it just got stronger and stronger. So I think I started when I was, even before then.
So now when you communicate with animals, just explain to us what that is, because I know some people are very skeptical about that. I've certainly been skeptical in my life, and then I'll have an experience that's remarkable, and I'll think, well, maybe you shouldn't be so skeptical. But for people who maybe have never even heard of animal communication, what is it? Is it real? Is everybody who says they're good at it good at it?
It's very real, but I think there are a lot of wonderful animal communicators who are very legitimate, very authentic, compassionate people. And then I think that others are not as they claim to be. I think their intentions are good, but it just isn't the same. And I'm very different than, I guess, the average animal communicator. And I actually call myself an animal empath, because that more closely fits what I feel is really happening. I once was reading or read or saw on a program, I don't even remember where, but an animal communicator told this woman what her dog was feeling and said she needed to read a book on her shelf to help her get through a relationship problem. And prior to that, I always wanted to stay very I didn't want to be out in the public eye. I didn't want to be scrutinized. I didn't want to be criticized or made fun of. I was very shy, very introverted. But when I heard that, I go, that's not how it is. Animals don't tell you to read a book on a shelf. Nor do they ask, they say that the chicken wants to sacrifice itself by laying its head on the chopping block to make your dinner, which an animal communicator that I actually thought was a wonderful communicator was saying. And I just said, no, this isn't right. So anyhow, that's when I decided to kind of come out of the animal communicator closet and start what I feel is the more accurate description of what's happening between the relationship, the communication between humans and animals.
So what's it like for those of us who have never experienced it, or maybe we have and don't even know that we have? What's it like? I think many of us have not had an experience of even telepathy, human to human. So the idea that an other than human being could communicate to us what they're thinking or feeling seems pretty alien. If you could describe it, that would be really cool.
Well, I think it is really alien the way on average. I mean, people can take a class and then suddenly they're an animal communicator and, they're doing this. And then the instructor's telling them to use their imagination. But I don't believe it works. That's just my opinion. I don't believe it works that way. I think you have to have a natural instinct of empathy for others, including humans and animals, in order to really do the work. And if that's not there, then I don't feel like you can really give a complete, accurate description. And I am more, for me, it's more, I guess I could explain it as like a radio transmission coming to me. It's not, I just take away all the anthropomorphic concepts of it. It's more their natural communication. And then when it comes to me, it's kind of an interpretation of what I believe is happening or what they're communicating. But it's not, it's not like somebody's coming in and saying, well, gee, I don't like Joe. You need to get a different boyfriend, and, that kind of thing. It's just different. It's just a more natural way that animals really communicate with each other. And I think watching animals together, if you have companion animals, and seeing how they communicate is probably a really great way to learn what I'm feeling and what many others are probably feeling. It's just not what the average person perceives it to be. And as I mentioned, taking a class and then suddenly, to me, that is kind of alien. I don't understand that.
I think it's a little bit like psychic gifts in the human world. I don't know that I know anybody who said, "Oh, I'm going to become a fake psychic and make a lot of money." I think the people that do that really do want to help, but I would really like to sing at the Metropolitan Opera. It's not going to happen. And so it's very beautiful when somebody like you who has the gift also wants to use it. I want to ask you a bit about a particular kind of animal because I know that you have a special affinity, and that is the parrot.
Yes.
And we do, our wonderful Elaine, who's going to be doing the next interview, had a wonderful pigeon companion who did leave the earth in the past month. So condolences continuing to go out to Elaine. But is it different when a parrot communicates with you than, say, a dog?
Not really. It's no, not really. I mean, I think, parrots obviously are very intelligent, even our tiny little budgies. And that's how I started getting very involved in parrot advocacy, because I don't believe parrots should be kept as pets, but they need to be rescued, just like a lot of other animals that ended up in the pet trade. But the communication is the same. It's like animal behavior work that I do. It works the same with a goldfish as it does for an elephant, that everything's the same. And the same is with the communication between a parrot and a dog, or a parrot and a monkey, or, a raccoon. Not that we're training raccoons per se, but yeah, it's pretty much the same.
So let's, Linda, talk a little bit about the intersection of your native culture and spirituality and your work with animals.
Um, I think, well, growing up, I didn't have that training. My mother would talk to me about some of her experiences as a child and her life on the reservation or the places that she lived. And at the time when I wasn't that interested in it, I kind of listened and then didn't absorb it. It was only later, when I was older and appreciated what she was saying. But growing up, there was not that real connection. I learned after the fact. I learned as I became an adult and became more interested in Native culture and the ancient traditions and how they lived with the animals.
So this is a difficult time of year for people who are native to this continent. Can you talk a little bit about the whole Thanksgiving thing for someone with your heritage?
They really don't celebrate Thanksgiving. At least some tribal members don't necessarily celebrate Thanksgiving the way we do. And it's more of a giving thanks in general for life and this beautiful planet we live on, rather than Columbus Day and things like, that. So it's not as much of a big deal. And it's celebrated again more. If it's going to be Thanksgiving, it's Thanksgiving for family, Thanksgiving for, again, our beautiful planet and the things that we can do to make it safer for our other species, including ourselves.
One of the things that has long kind of annoyed me is when people say, white people, well, I eat meat the way the Native Americans ate meat, and I pray for the soul of the animal. And there are just so many layers of why that's troubling. And I understand not everybody is vegetarian. We're all on a journey. We're all, trying every day to be better than we were yesterday. But I have a hard time with that one. Can you, as a Native person, address that?
I have a problem with it too, because it's First of all, during the times when native tribes had to hunt to survive, and granted, some families still do to make it through the winter, some areas, especially on some reservations, that are low income. But that's completely different than the average person who goes out on the weekend or a holiday to celebrate their time off, to go as a recreation, hunt and kill, and then they give thanks to the animal. It's in my opinion, it's like a betrayal to the animal, because it didn't have to happen. And most of those people who go out and kill an animal and then give thanks, I ask, do you really understand what that means? Do you really understand what it means to take that life? And it would be, I'd like to hear what that means, just so I understand where they're coming from. But for me personally, I think if you really want to give thanks, you should protect these animals and give thanks that you can do that, and to help make our planet safe and healthy. That's what I think we should be giving blessings to. We don't need to kill the animals and do that to them.
So we're kind of church, kind of synagogue, kind of ashram, kind of mosque. We're all that stuff and others together. So I would love to ask you, Linda, how can you describe your spiritual life? Just what's your worldview? How do you see the big picture?
Oh, wow, that's a big question.
It is, I know.
Well, I have to live my life in a way that makes me feel good about myself. It makes me feel like I've not harmed any creature, and that I can sit back and say I did my best to make the world a better place and not to cause pain or suffering. And I think, going back to the conversation about being an animal communicator, I think where it starts is truly being a compassionate person, because once you feel that empathy and that compassion, that's when you start connecting so deeply, which is what animal communicators should be doing. And I think in my life, I just try my best to do the right thing. And to me, to do the right thing is not to cause harm. And animals they feel joy, they feel fear, they hurt, they struggle, they play, they laugh internally. So, I mean, they have feelings, and we can't ignore that. So from my perspective, I want to feel good that I lived a kind life.
You live a kind life, and you live a beautiful life, and you bring a lot of beauty to the world through just what you radiate, what you do in your work with animals, because I know a lot of people have animals and they acquire these animals with all the best of intention, and then they don't know what to do when the animal starts acting like an animal. So how wonderful that some people have access to your expertise in that way. But I do want to ask about your art, because I'm not visual. So it's very seldom that I'm moved by art. A few times. There's a very, he's well known in kind of esoteric circles, an artist called Nicholas Roerich. And there's a museum of his work here in New York City. He was a theosophist. He left Russia during the revolution and ended up in the Himalayas. And a lot of his best works are done on cardboard because he couldn't get canvas. But he used these just amazing colors. It's almost like when I look at his work, I see heaven, not earth. It's the same when I look at yours, although yours are obviously of the most beautiful and extraordinary parts of earth, because it's these animals with their spirits just shining forth. So tell us about the art. Are these actual animals you have seen with your eyes, or these animals you've seen with your soul? How do you do it, and where can we look at it?
Oh, thank you. That's so sweet. Well, some of the animals are animals that I have seen. Some are animals that I've experienced and had an experience with. And I wanted to kind of tell their story when I got home in my studio. And others, just reading an article about something that moved me either in a good way or a frightened way, I wanted, as an artist, to bring that, to canvas and paint what I was feeling. But mostly my art is representative of how we need to become a part of nature and a part of those animals. Speaking of animals, I have my assistant here and she's getting wiggly. So it's just, a lot of my paintings have animals who are a human who is transforming into an animal, or they're having wings, or they're having, spots. And that's because when I started doing this, I want people, it's a part of empathy. It's a part of feel how that feels to have those wings. And when I do animal communication work, and my animal empathic work, I literally can feel the way an animal walks within myself. If it's whatever animal that might be, I can feel the gait. And it's hard to explain. I can't ever explain it to people, but I can feel how a snake feels when they're going through the grass. And that's just, so when I paint, I'm trying to kind of convey that same feeling.
Well, you convey it beautifully. So Linda G. Fisher, thank you so much for being a person with wings and for gracing us today at the Compassion Consortium. Bless you.